Again, just to say thanks for having me here. My name is Joe Shultz, and I grew up in Ohio, in western Ohio, about an hour west of Columbus. My mother actually grew up right here in Wooster, and I still have family here, the Bowen family, so just drove by my maternal grandparents' farm on the way in on Smithville Western Road. And so it's good to be back in Wooster, and it's good to be back in Ohio in general. For 4 years, I worked for Senator Brown handling his agriculture work. For the last 2 years, I've worked for Chairwoman Debbie Stabenow from Michigan. Thank you, Dr. Slack, for mentioning that. Just because I work for her doesn't mean I have to root for her football team. But I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to work for the Chairwoman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, which has been one of the more interesting ups and downs of Farm Bill policy in recent memory, which is the writing of the 2012 Farm Bill. And so today I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about some of the policies that are in there, why we think those are obviously good, and we'll obviously open this up for questions and informal discussion about that policy. I'll talk a little bit about the process, and finally just a note on the politics that are holding up the Farm Bill and have actually led to an expiration of the Farm Bill. We're actually in limbo right now. We don't have a Farm Bill. But just a personal note to start out, I think it's useful, especially now during campaign season. Everything is so partisan, especially in a state like Ohio. And I think just to let you know what an honor it is for people like Kristen and I to work on agriculture issues in Washington, D.C. because they are so bipartisan. And it has been so much fun for me, as a kid who grew up on a farm in Ohio, to see behind the curtain, working on the Senate Agriculture Committee, to see how senators actually get together, work together when the cameras are off, when newspapers aren't there, to say, we're going to get things done for American agriculture, we're going to get things done for rural communities, small towns, and consumers who ultimately rely on those products. It's a good feeling, and I know there's a lot of negativity right now about Washington, but I can tell you that there is a lot of good going on, and I'm certainly proud to be a part of that and to work for folks who want to be bipartisan and actually get things done. And I think one of the best examples of this Congress in the last 2 years has been the Farm Bill. It came together with a strong bipartisan vote. The ranking member that is the lead Republican on the committee is Pat Roberts from Kansas. Worked with the Democrats from Debbie Stabenow to certainly Senator Brown from Ohio, because everybody who chooses to be on the Agriculture Committee truly cares about the issues. You don't choose to be on the Agriculture Committee unless you want to work on those things. And unless you really want to dive down into the details of things like crop insurance and dairy policy. These are complicated things that might not have, not everybody thinks this is the most fun to get down into the details of crop insurance, but these people do, because they understand the importance of it to rural America. And more than that, when we talk about seeing behind the curtain, you can also see these members when again, we're not in an open hearing, but they're in group meetings together, and they're fighting on behalf of their states. I've been there when Debbie Stabenow is fighting to say, we have a large specialty crop industry in Michigan. We need to make sure those folks are taken care of because of the frost. When Senator Brown is fighting, saying, we have a lot of small towns and rural communities in Ohio who are hurting, have high unemployment. What can we do to invest in jobs and local infrastructure? They are sincere and they fight for that, and I think we should all be proud of that. And it's on both sides of the aisle. Just a little bit about the process. I want to take you back almost to a year ago, because we are not having a discussion about the Farm Bill without having a discussion about the federal budget. The two are intertwined. And that's an issue that I think that we in agriculture should recognize and we should be proud of. Because the agriculture committees in a bipartisan way stood up and they said, we are going to take cuts. We're going to voluntarily, without anyone telling us what to do, we're going to stand up and we're going to cut the programs that we have jurisdiction over. We're going to do it in a proportional way. We're going to cut roughly $23 billion out of agriculture committees and contribute that to deficit reduction. $23 billion is roughly proportional to what the original super committee process, if you remember from a year ago, what they were tasked with finding in terms of deficit. That is proportional to what their overall goal of cuts were relative to what the agriculture budget is compared to the entire federal budget. So agriculture's portion is roughly $23 billion. We did it in a bipartisan way. And we cut things that were important. We cut things in Title I in the commodity title. We cut things in conservation. We cut things in nutrition. These are things that are hard to do, that folks in Washington don't like cutting because it means delivering bad news. But we did it because we felt a joint responsibility, and the members of the committee felt like they had a responsibility to contribute in a reasonable and responsible way to deficit pressures. That process that happened almost a year ago this fall led to a committee markup in the Senate, where the Senate Agriculture Committee produced a bill last April, again passed on a good bipartisan measure. We had one Democrat opposed, we had 3 Republicans opposed. When you have a couple of folks from each party opposing, you know you have a pretty centrist, pretty good bill. Saved $23 billion, did some very important things. One, it eliminated the direct payment program. And for those of you who have been following ag and farm policy for a while, this has been a contentious program. It sends a check to producers, to farmers of big commodities, regardless of what prices are doing, regardless of where yields are. And it invested those monies back into things that help out when farmers actually have a disaster, like this summer. When folks have a drought, when we have a price collapse, producers need help. They don't need a check, regardless of what's going on in the ag economy. That was a major reform, and I think we should all be proud of moving forward away from that system and into something that's a little more responsive to farmers' needs. Secondly, we made a real effort to expand risk management tools for all producers, not just producers of covered commodities, not just corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, and rice, the traditional big 5 covered commodities. We made sure that dairy producers have a better safety net. For a long, long time, dairy producers have had a safety net that said, if in fact the price of milk drops below a certain level, producers are going to get a little help from the federal government. But it never took into account the cost of feed, never took into account the price of corn, the price of hay. Now that program does. And if we can only get this bill passed, dairy producers around the country are going to have access to a much better, much more effective safety net. We expanded crop insurance to specialty crops. Fruit and vegetable production has huge potential in places like Ohio. Even in Wooster, a town of, how big is Worcester these days? 30,000? 25,000?
Yeah, about 27,000.
Is it called Local Roots? Is that your direct farm market? Fantastic stuff going on there. Tremendous opportunity for local producers to directly market their produce. But they don't have nearly the same type of risk management tools as crop insurance if you were just to go out and grow corn and soybeans. We need to level that playing field for those producers. So this farm bill expanded risk management tools to fruit and vegetable growers to make sure that everybody has access to crop insurance, that nobody goes out of business because of a few days of bad weather. The other thing that I think that we're very excited about this farm bill is the focus on conservation. The conservation title did take some cuts. Took over $5 billion worth of cuts in trying to fix our deficit problems. But in place of those cuts, we tried to streamline and make those programs much more efficient and effective to help with farmers. If any of you have used NRCS conservation programs, they're wonderful. They do great things, but they're complicated. They take a lot of time, they take a lot of staff hours to put those applications together, and it's a lot of contract and paperwork. How can we streamline that process so producers can go into their local NRCS office, go to the local soil and water folks and say, I want to do something good on my land. I want to be a good steward of the land. I need a little financial assistance to do that. How do we make that happen and make it happen easier, cleaner, in a more streamlined way? So those are some of the highlights of the bill that was passed out of the Senate committee. We then went to the Senate floor in early June, and in an unprecedented process, usually when a floor goes to the Senate, everyone agrees on voting on 3 or 4 amendments. 3 or 4 or 5. That's usually a big number. That'll take a week to vote on those 3 or 4 amendments. The senators agreed to vote on 73 separate amendments to the Farm Bill. Unprecedented. No one knew what to do with themselves. They said, we have no idea. We're going to vote on sugar policy, dairy policy, payment limits, conservation. Every issue came up. And at the beginning, I have to tell you, being on the floor of the Senate, watching these senators who, for the past 6 months, had stood around and given speeches about how we need to do more to work on the deficit. We need to do more legislating, but never actually doing it. And they got down there and they started voting on these amendments. And I tell you, there was a lot of educating going on. A lot of educating going on from staff to members talking about the nuances of dairy policy to 100 senators. But you know what? They got through it, and by the end, these senators were excited about working on the farm bill because they were making progress and they were moving forward. And it was the momentum of that saying we're actually doing something that's good, that's bipartisan, that's reducing the deficit, and we're having a real and open, honest debate about it. And I think that open and honest process did more than anything to get us a strong vote out of the Senate. We got 64 votes, which is four votes more than you need to defeat a filibuster. A strong bipartisan vote to move it on for consideration by the House. Here's where this cheery story gets a little less fun. The House Agriculture Committee really started out in a good way with another bipartisan product. We had our disagreements about the policy that the House put forward, but that's the process. We can work through the policy differences, but they need to move forward with a bill. The House of Representatives, unfortunately, after they brought their bipartisan bill out of their committee, the House leadership said, this isn't something we're going to do until after the elections. And this is something that I think is disappointing for my boss, Senator Stabenow. I know it's disappointing for Senator Brown, because right now we are living without a farm bill. The 2008 Farm Bill has expired. We do not have a replacement bill, and that means there are no new contracts going out for conservation programs. There are no contracts going out to help dairy producers if prices fall. We can't enter into any new foreign food assistance. If right now there's a foreign food disaster somewhere in the world and if American producers can help out by donating some of that food, we can't do it because we can't enter into a contract to hire the ships to send the food over there. We can't enter into contracts to help American producers export more food. We can't do any of this because we don't have a farm bill. And I think it's disappointing that in fact politics has gotten in front of what could be some good policy. There's a lot of work to be done moving forward between the House and the Senate, but the House has to move, and we certainly encourage them